Which piece of information you know because of your job or study will shock the average person? Before we start with the first story, please hit subscribe and ring the notification bell to stay updated with us. Story 1. I'm a social worker. Used to work in an ICU, which was mostly hospice-related care. Dying at home is not always easier or better for the patient. Home hospice, at least in New York, only covers in right now to come and visit maybe 1 time a week. Occasionally, someone to drop off O2 and supplies, and a social worker will come in frequently. If you're lucky, you may get a couple hours of a home health aide per week. The rest of the care is provided by family or a private hire home health aide. In addition to this, home hospice usually lasts between days to about 6 months. So that means you could be out of work and providing care for months. Lastly, medical professionals are not very good at estimating prognosis for a terminal illness. They can give a general idea, days, weeks, months, etc., but they don't have a magical countdown set up somewhere. Story 2. That we really do try to design construction zones to get you through as easily as possible. A lot of thought and hard work goes into designing those traffic restrictions. Sometimes, there just aren't any good solutions. We can't fix it if you're driving on it. And yes, sometimes we do tear up a perfectly good road. What you don't know is that the fixing we did 3 years ago was just a band-aid to keep the road drive-able for 5 until we can finish the design to repair what's really wrong. That 1.5 inches of milling and resurfacing is holding the crumbling base together long enough to get the funding to do the real construction. Story 3. A shockingly low number of kids are actually on grade level, and they just get passed on, whether or not they're literate. When I taught English at a Title I school, I had around 38% pass, and that was considered good. When state tests were canceled in 2020, everyone on my Facebook was exclaiming, "They're just going to pass everybody to the next grade?" But what if someone would have failed the test, but now they get to go to the next grade anyway? That is already 60+% of kids. The general public thinks that if they fail all their classes and the state tests, they have to stay behind because they're not proficient. Sadly, no. Story 4. If someone has diarrhea or vomits in a pool, it doesn't need to be drained. In fact, draining the pool might even be less effective if proper disinfection procedures aren't followed after draining the pool. Instead, the chlorine level needs to be raised to at least 20 ppm for at least 13 hours after all physical pieces of vomit or have been removed. Doing this will kill any possible Cryptosporidium bacteria in the pool. What does 20 ppm chlorine feel like? Simply by putting your hand in the water to get a sample will cause your skin to dry up. Edit. Pool needs to be closed for 13 hours, not 23rd. Story 5. I work at a union, and I think the average person would be shocked by the amount of abuse that is happening in the job market. Bosses strategically bully their employees, jumping through tons of legal hoops to fire employees in the way that leaves them with the least benefits. Companies going through $100K worth of lawyers to avoid paying wages amounting to like $15K. Thousands of people every month, many of them not believing they would ever need a union, that their workplace would ever do something to them. And that is here in Denmark, with strong unions and solid workplace protections. I dread how this would look in many other countries. I sort of knew it was bad before I started. But after 10-ish years, I have sort of accepted that no one should ever really trust their company to not f them over. Sometimes for stupid, petty reasons. Story 6. I work in upper management in a large company, and I am shocked how often people think something is a calculated move with data that we analyze to come up with the conclusion that X is the most profitable way. Even if we have analysts with data, most big decisions are done by some C-suite person, or in a meeting, nobody reading any data or maybe just a front page and then just saying, "This, we will do it this way." Even if it completely contradicts the data. It's just a bunch of random guys betting on their hunch, rarely asking for data on anything. Even if something is calculated, it most likely is because we had a problem with it for X years, and someone says, "We will do it another way," and numbers turn out better, no longer a problem. There is not much logic running companies. Story 7. I work for a charity that supports victims of violent crime, particularly domestic abuse survivors. If you are a man coming to us, you will probably be treated really bad. Attitudes are definitely getting better, but the opinion that men are the abusers and can't be abused is extremely rampant. Edit. For some reason, there are people in the comments saying that men can't be abused, so here are the facts. 1 in 3 women and 1 in 4 men have experienced some form of physical violence by an intimate partner. This includes a range of behaviors, for example, slapping, shoving, pushing. 14% of women have experienced coercive control, and 16% of men have experienced coercive control. These are UK-based statistics, but it illustrates my point that men can also be abused. Cut it out with the arguing. Yes, women experience more physical violence, but men also experience it. Yes, more men experience coercive control, but women still experience it. If you are being abused, no matter your gender, please step forward. It's incredibly hard, but charities like mine exist for a reason. Story 8. I was in Rand Chemist in the food packaging industry for many years. We made a coating for those little cat food tins, like Fancy Feast. Many people don't know that the expensive ocean whitefish tuna patty flavor only contains a tiny sliver of whitefish tuna. They produce it by taking little frozen blocks of all of the guts left over from the fish processing industry, all different types of fish. They put one little sliver of ocean whitefish on the top of the block and send it into a grinder. From there, it goes into the cans. Total rip-off. Not to mention the smell in that processing plant was god-awful. Story 9. I work at the corporate level. True executive compensation is mind-blowing. I'm not talking about base salary, bonuses, and stocks. Those are public knowledge, and we hear about them every day. I'm talking about the extra perks no one talks about. Things like mortgages subsidized by the organization, company cars that are 6-figure luxury vehicles, car home insurance on the company account, company-paid private school tutors for children, wardrobe, beauty, fitness, stipends, club memberships, access to the corporate jet for personal travel. I could go on and on. Imagine what simply not having to pay your full mortgage or car loan would do for you financially, let alone all of the rest. Story 10. I work in housing in Louisiana. There are millions of dollars that get wasted every year because people don't know how to fill out a housing application that gets them housed for free, or they got high and forgot to submit it. People are so worried about the homeless crisis in major cities. But if people knew how much money we really have, mostly from taxes and private millionaire donors, you'd be f***ing shocked. And the housing isn't a bedroom in a halfway house. It's a genuine, nice 1-bedroom apartment. Story 11. Airplanes fly with broken equipment all the time. Always have. Obviously, if something important is broken, we won't go. But you can have a good chunk of your systems inoperative and still be okay to carry passengers. There's a thing called a minimum equipment list, Mel. And if you find something broken, let's say hydraulic system 1 pump, you look it up in the MEL and it gives you the conditions you need to fly with an inoperative HYD SYS 1 pump. The common culprit in these MEL is the APU, basically a small turbine engine in the equipment bay that provides electricity and air pressure when the engines are not running. If you've ever been near a jet that didn't have its engines running, but you could still hear jet engine noise, it's this thing. So a lot of commercial jets fly with a broken APU. It's safe, but just a real pain in the ass for the flight and ground crews. You basically have to jumpstart the engines every time. Story 12. Strip clubs are at best systems of indentured servitude and at worst directly responsible for trafficking women into sex work, slavery, and drugs. I am an ex-dancer. All clubs charge dancers fees to work there. The club I was working at increased their fees dramatically in the years after COVID first hit, but did not increase the price of dances due to the economy and wanting to keep customers coming in. Every dancer employed at the club has an account with very high weekly fees that the dancers have to pay off. Dancers are also subject to fines for misconduct, like being late on the floor by 1 minute. At the club I worked at, we paid nearly $500 a week, plus 20% of our dances plus fines. If we missed work, we had to pay huge fines. Some weeks you'd hardly break even due to very few customers and the club overhiring dancers. That is, you'd be working for less than, or the equivalent of minimum wage, but at the risk of being sexually assaulted every night. Sexual assault happens all the time. No one cares. There is no health care and no union. If you can't get enough dances and tips to pay your club fees, you are either fired or gradually forced into doing extras just to pay the club. That and the long hours is why drug abuse and alcoholism is rife in the industry. Story 13. An enormous amount of posts on Instagram and TikTok are sponsored, either directly or indirectly, by major corporations and media groups. Almost nothing popular is actually just someone making a video or post. The money goes through a lot of hands, so the general public doesn't see who the post is sponsored by. Clean talk? paid for by cleaning and chemical companies. Testimonials on birth control, paid for by the Koch brothers, major right-wing donors. Cute trad wives making bread, paid for both by the rich family they are from and right-wing media groups. None of it is real. The people on there are being paid a lot to push a product or message to you. There is no law saying they have to tell you that fact. Honestly, they may not know the source. It scares the hell out of me that Gen Z thinks any of it is trustworthy or accurate information. Also, reality TV is heavily scripted and manipulated by producers and editors. It's not real either. Story 14. I think the sheer amount of information Google knows about you and how unashamed they are in trying to get people's data from businesses who utilize their ad services would shock people. I work in digital marketing, and yeah, Google is a nightmare. Their most recent thing is customer match lists. What this basically is trying to convince businesses to give them all their customer data as a way to have even more data. They try to spin it as, oh, if you do this, we can use it on Google Ads to showcase your ads to people who are the same as your existing customers, as they may be more likely to become customers. Which, yeah, I guess could work. But it is incredibly obvious they are doing it just to try and farm data. Google reps would regularly call our office about this, trying to get us to give them this info. And you will get recommendations through every few weeks which try to push you into sending them this data so you can continue using their services. We refuse every time, but I bet a lot of companies gave in. It's honestly so dirty. But the issue is, Google is the most utilized search engine, so using Google Ads is kind of a must for most companies. They're really bad for it and have so much data on so many people. Story 15. Early childhood trauma is visible in teeth. Trauma in this sense is anything that causes a stress response in the body. Could be illness, could be parental separation, could be abuse, etc. Longer explanation. Teeth grow at a predictable rate, almost exactly like trees. If you bisected a tooth and examined it under a microscope, you'd see rings of growth. Growth is disrupted in times of stress. The first stress ring we all had on our baby teeth is from birth. Other stressors can create other disrupted growth rings in baby teeth, and the same is true for adult teeth as they are still forming. My former professor was a pioneer in dental anthropology. For his work on these stress lines, he'd ask his zoo colleagues to send him the teeth of deceased primates, or just teeth that had to be pulled. Would demand no other information be given at first. Then he and his grad students would section the teeth, put them under a microscope, and print out the pictures. They'd mark visible signs of disrupted growth, and knowing that birth is the first disruption and the rate at which teeth grow, they could then give day counts for every growth disruption after birth. Once they collected their data, my professor would then ask their zoo colleagues for the daily health logs for the primate. And what they found is that each growth disruption exactly corresponds to stress events in the primate's life. Some instances were from illness or the like. But to me, the most interesting event he told us about was seeing a stress line on the tooth that exactly corresponded with the primate as a baby, being removed from their mother for a period of time to do necessary health checks at the zoo. This caused such a stress response in the baby that it was visible in the tooth growth. Alright folks, that's a wrap. If you like more of this, please hit the thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. You can also share your thoughts in the comment below. I'll see you in the next video.